On today's episode, we're talking to the fantastic Brian Aquart, the VP of Workforce and Community Education at Northwell Health. We talk about how a follow-up email transformed Brian's career trajectory, how Gen Zs are changing workforce forever, and the importance of taking risks to escape the status quo. Join Brian and I to learn how he is impacting the healthcare industry and achieving new heights, driving innovation by connecting healthcare and education in New York and beyond. I'll see you there. Welcome everybody to today's podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Brian Aquart. Brian is the VP of Workforce and Community Education at Northwell Health. And I think, if I'm correct, Brian, that's the largest healthcare provider in New York State. Is that correct?
That's correct. We are the largest healthcare provider in New York State and the largest private employer in New York State.
Okay, cool. So, well, look, firstly, welcome. Great to have you here for our session today. Hopefully we're going to delve into some nice, interesting areas. But firstly, it'd be lovely just to get to know you a little bit. Tell us a bit about yourself, Brian, and what's brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, the line I've been running with of late is I'm an employment attorney by trade, health executive by day, and podcaster by night. And so that kind of sums up a lot of the things I do. I've been in New York now for over 10 years. I started out in employment law. I was in private practice for a little bit. And then I moved about through volunteering. I eventually went in-house, and I worked for city government for two different agencies for about 3-year stints each. And there I did investigations into discrimination, harassment, retaliation, those types of things. And then that was at the first agency, and then the next agency was really leading that investigative unit. And then in 2016, I needed to, it's funny, we'll kind of talk about it probably a little bit more, but I needed a bit of a change. And so I pivoted into healthcare. Been there ever since. That's hence Northwell. But I started out in HR. And so I kind of progressed through the HR ranks, then had a nice little pivot and ended up kind of supporting our CEO for a little bit. And now I'm in this new role now. So it's been a very, I would like to say, scenic route for me, but I've enjoyed every minute of it.
I think on the show and talking to members is always good fun. I think it's very rare to find a truly linear route to the job role that people are in, and I look forward to digging into that a little bit with you, because I'm sure there's some good lessons that we're going to uncover along the way. Look, the general theme of our podcast, Brian, is around embracing this idea of failure and how we can use it to power our growth. And the reason that we wanted to come and have a conversation with you is that you'd written this article, Unleash Your Inner Strength, 3 Steps to Embracing Struggles as a Catalyst for Growth. And it really sparked our interest. So I thought, well, let's start there. Tell us a bit about these 3 steps, if you like, and second to that, why they were important to you. What did they come from?
I met with a young lady. Her name was Julie Deem, or is Julie Deem, I should say. And we had a great conversation about, well, how are you actually pivoting? Why are you doing this? And what's interesting is that I come into these types of conversations open, right? I never know what I'm going to get, right? And so with her, I was like, look, here is somebody who actually was in working as a massage therapist, and now is pivoting into starting her own thing. And so I wanted to know why, and her really discussion is what sparked me writing this article, because I think it's a lot about resilience and overcoming these types of things. So what I laid out, I just wanted to give that background to kind of tee up as to why I even wrote this thing. And so what I ended up summarizing was really 3 steps that people can take to kind of embrace their life struggles, right? And that's reframing your mindset, seeking support and guidance, and then taking calculated risks and learn from your failures, right? And you see that in her story, but I too had to reframe my mindset. And this is also a great piece of the show that I often go back and think about pieces in my life as I'm talking to guests, and I'm like, oh, I wasn't that into it at that time to say, hey, here's what I was doing. But now I look back on it, I was doing some of these things. So let's start with like reframing your mindset. So for me, I graduated law school at a time where, at least here in America, the market was terrible, right? '08, 2008 was the big market crash. And 2009 is when I graduated. And we are often referred to as like the lost generation or the forgotten class, if you will, of law grads. And it was tough for me to find something when I eventually got to New York. And so I had to think about, well, what is it like? Am I on the right path? And is what I'm doing the right thing? Because the market's telling me that, you're not ready for this. And I don't know if it's because, is it a me thing or is it a market thing? And so, you had to kind of step back. I personally had to kind of step back and really embrace that discomfort, not knowing what was going to go on. So what did I do? I mean, when I got to New York, I was an extra on People's Court. I was that People's Court is like a it's like a judge TV show, right? That they have over here. I was an extra there. I was doing all types of volunteer work. Like, I really humbled myself, to be honest. But I always kept moving forward, right? I always kept moving forward, which leads truthfully into the next one, right? I talked about seeking support and guidance. Well, I didn't my father was here, obviously big family support system, but they weren't the ones getting me jobs or giving me the opportunities, right? But I had to get out there and really network with folks who were in the same space. And I've often talked, and we can get into this later, but there was one woman who really kind of changed my trajectory in a major way, and it wouldn't have happened had I not been intentional about seeking that type of support, seeking that type of guidance, and truly being open about what it is I was looking for and why. And that kind of blends in also the taking calculated risks, right? Like making sure that I was in the right places and doing the right things. I'm not going to these networking events to have fun, drink, and eat free food, right? It's I mean, that may be an added bonus, but what are we really here for, right? And so I was very intentional when I would go to events. I'd look at the agenda beforehand. There's at least 1 to 3 people's names. I need to meet them. I need to at least speak to that person, right? And did it always work out? No, it didn't. But you keep going. You keep moving forward. And so that's really the origins of the article, right? My conversation with Julie on the show really kind of sparked, like, you know what, this is like, I really resonate with her conversation, and in my case, I've struggled a certain bit, but it's always helped me, right? So when I was doing my opener earlier, I talked about taking the scenic route. It was rough while I was on the route, but I'm so glad that I went through it because it's allowed me to really appreciate the things that have happened since. And I know that, you know, really there's nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, I love the way that you talk quite succinctly about the 3 stages, because I think the last one about finding and identifying those people that you need to learn from, you of course have really got to go through that stage of uncovering what you need to learn, putting yourself in those, you said, uncomfortable situations. But I think so often we hear people talk about actually that all the big growth for them has happened when they've been most uncomfortable. Like you said, moving to a new city, having to do things that perhaps you hadn't planned on doing, but the learning and the discovery that you get from that is really really important, or clearly very important to your growth journey, Brian, for sure.
Definitely.
Tell me about the lady who changed your life then. This is interesting. I'm always interested when someone says that there was a moment that changed how you viewed things, or that you changed your approach perhaps to how your leadership journey came about.
Yeah. So I'll never forget, I was at a New York State Bar Association event, and it was 2009-ish, right? 10-ish. And it was a panel, a few judges on the panel. And at the end of the event, I had just happened to be, out networking, walking around, saying hello to folks. And I met a woman named Lauren Wachtler. And the reason why Lauren is so pivotal for me is because when I introduced myself to her, We had a great conversation. And then she just straight up asked me, well, well, what are you looking for? Right. And I was like, to be honest, like I'm looking for, because I was applying to clerkships, DA's offices, all those places. I was like, I'm looking for, a clerkship of sorts. So like judge jobs, or if I could, work for a judge, if there's any, other type of associate roles that are happening. She's like, you know what? You need to meet this person right here. Right. And it was a judge at the time. And she was like, send me an email about your interest with, cover letter and all that. And let's see if something can work out. And I was like, okay, great. Because the one thing I will say about me, Stephen, is that, and folks who know me, who may listen to this, is that when someone tells me to do something, I will do it. Right. So and it doesn't matter the level, a CEO could tell me, hey, you should reach out, would love to stay connected, whatever. I'll send you the email. I will do that. I always follow up. And so I did just that with her. And I kid you not, within 2 weeks, I had a volunteer clerkship. After I sent the note, I got a note back from someone, a clerk in Judge. It was actually here. It was the commercial division in New York State Supreme Court. I had a note from the clerk coming in for an interview. I met with Judge Freed. We had a great conversation. And he asked me, when can you start? I was like, well, I'm not doing anything. So I can start whenever you need me. And within 2 weeks, I had a role, and I'll call it a job, even though it was volunteer, but it felt like a job to me. Right. And the reason it opened my eyes so much is because I had been at other venues and networking with other folks, just trying to catch some break, and was getting nowhere, right? Getting ghosted. I mean, often, hey, tell me to reach out to me, would love to connect, blah, 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 reaching out and then getting ghosted. And I'm like, well, damn, like, why'd you do that? You know what I mean? And I get it. I'm not, I wasn't gonna be able to bring you business or anything like that. I'm trying to get in. But Lauren, it was very selfless. It was, I'm presuming she enjoyed the conversation. Got, when you get a good vibe off somebody, right? She likely got a good vibe off me and put me out there. And I'll never forget that. If I didn't get that role, I don't know if I would have still been in New York. But it was the little bit of movement that I needed to kind of keep going, right? You know how you need those little sparks? She gave me that spark, and I'll never forget her for that.
That's it's amazing, isn't it, when that moment of kindness, what an impact it can have on your journey.
Absolutely.
And for her, I mean, it cost her nothing, did it? It cost her
Right.
no time, just the moment to take the care to listen and have that conversation with you. And I think so often in my career, if I think about times where actually, if you just take that extra 30 seconds to just listen, or to just open yourself to maybe that opportunity that otherwise wouldn't have been there, whether that's helping somebody out, giving, in the way that Lauren did, but or for yourself doing so. So I think that's really important. And I think, so let's kind of fast forward a little bit then, Brian, in terms
Yeah.
of, those different stages of your career. A big part of what we're trying to normalize in Blend, in the community, is this idea of just sharing some of the times when we famously got it wrong. Because I feel like at the managerial level, and even senior managerial level, it's celebrated. Failure is quite well talked about, and as senior leaders, we encourage our managers to fail. We encourage them to go and try things, and it's okay. But when you get to that upper rostrum, it's less normal, because it's so directly linked to maybe shareholder performance or what have you, that we don't do that as much. So hopefully here we can learn a little bit about perhaps maybe your biggest failure. What was the moment when you thought, oh crap, it's all over? and maybe, and most importantly though, what did you take from that? What did it lead to? What did you learn from that episode?
Yeah, and I've had like many failures, right? I don't think I've ever had a failure that was like, oh, it's over. But I've had things happen where I'm like, you know what? I could have taken an extra step there, right? And so I'll now go up to in one of the HR roles I was in. And so I served for a while in the healthcare space. I was a manager or HRBP at first with a business partner, and then I got into a director role. And in the director role, you know, things that happened in like workforce planning and things like that, there was an initiative where one group was getting ready to kind of get consolidated at a much higher level, and it was going to impact the team in ways that, I don't know if it could have led to potentially, folks no longer needing that role. And so what happened was I went about it in a way where um, I thought the level of communication I was giving to the leader and the team made sense. I thought it was clear as to what was happening, but I also relied on some of the centralization efforts that they were also communicating that information, and that is where I messed up. And what I could have done is been a bit closer to them on guiding them through the next steps that were going to happen, because HR is a very sensitive space. You can, some of the moves that may happen could impact people's lives, right? If this role is no longer needed, what does that mean for you, right? And you, as you may have a spouse or children or whoever, or it's just yourself, and some source of income may no longer be there. And it's not that I didn't think about that. I did, but I could have done a better job of communicating upfront what some of the next steps were going to be. And truthfully, I could have done a better job of communicating that information in person. I was around COVID time, and so things were still a bit, virtual and remote, and I had kind of been in that realm. And so I hosted this session that was virtual and caught some flack for it. And as I thought about it afterwards, I was like, you know what? You should have gone in. You should have gone. And I was at the hospital, just everybody was scattered, but I should have been more intentional about setting up time in person to tell them what's about to happen and tell them what's going on and tell them what their steps are going to be. And I think about that, right? I think about that. In my former line, I mean, in all of my work, there's a level of care that I've always taken. And it's not that I was trying to shortcut at that time. I think I was kind of just in the way we were working at the moment, or in the moment. And I could have done that better. And so I think that was a bit of a failure on my end.
It's HR and people is an area where failure is so personal to people as well, isn't it? In that
It
you're
is.
exactly right. You're dealing with the human aspect of the working environment. So your failures are felt not just maybe um, in the balance sheet in some way, shape, or form, but more importantly in the culture and in the environment that people are experiencing. So I feel
Right.
like failure, when it's aligned to HR and people and is it hurts differently uh, than perhaps other areas of business, and maybe has to be embraced slightly differently. Um,
Right.
Talk to me about the culture of failure. Then, what in your experience, Brian, where have you seen the culture of failure work, or have you seen it work?
Yeah. So I will say that, the organization that I'm with right now, um, Northwell, we have a culture, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, in that we have a culture where we take big risks, and at times some of those risks may not pan out, but it's not the end of the world. And so, and especially having worked for, our leader for a while, the company's leader for a while, it's a genuine mission. So it is okay for you to fail, right? It's important that you at least take risks, because nobody wants to remain in the status quo, and we're no different, right? We are a very large healthcare organization. We're on the cutting edge of not only health as it's delivered in its truest sense, but innovation, education, leadership, all of these things, artificial intelligence. I mean, we're on the cutting edge of a lot of these things. And we had to take risks to get there. And look, everything may not pan out, but you'll never know if you don't try. And so I think that when you talk about the culture of failure or the culture of risk, I think I work at an organization. I know I work at an organization that allows you to do that. And it's not the end of the world. I mean, look, you got to, I mean, and when I say risk, like calculated risk, so people aren't just being willy nilly with decisions, right? But like, if there are things that you're like, hey, we want to go for X, well, how do we do that? Well, take a chance. Let's take a chance on that. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but at least you tried. But you know what's great? If it does work out, and when it does work out, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing that happens, and the culture here allows us to do that. So I'm very very proud to work in a place that kind of gives us that leverage.
And you mentioned in there, Brian, that comes right from the top, comes from the CEO. In that it's almost a mission to embrace that risk or embrace the opportunity of failing. Um, how does that translate into your leadership, and then how do you translate that into like practically into your teams, into the business? What advice would you give someone? Say, well, look, these are the things that you need to do to make sure that your team is able to do that.
Great question. So our CEO is Michael Dowling, and he's been with the system. I think he's one of the longest, if not the longest, serving healthcare CEOs in the U.S. And having had the pleasure of kind of working for him directly, you see that, you know, sometimes you get verbiage from on high, and you never know if people really believe it. He believes it, and it is in everything, in every fiber of what we do and what he does. And so I guess I speak from a little bit of a different vantage point in that for me it's more than like, people talk about, corporate Kool-Aid, if you will, right? But it's not that. It is genuine. He is genuine about his thoughts on we should be doing more. Here's why we should be doing more. And that leaders, managers and leaders need to create these environments that allow folks to do so. Give them that flexibility, have them take risks. Because again, that whole status quo piece is not where we want to be, right? We don't want to be there at all. And so, how does that trickle down to not only me, but other leaders in the system? I think they genuinely, we kind of take those marching orders, right? And so I'll kind of pivot into some of the work I'm doing now, in that, we had a chance to start working with the New York City Public Schools on an initiative called Future Ready NYC. And it was an initiative where a new city administration was coming in. They had this mission around bright starts and bold futures, and the bold futures piece is around, or one of the pieces around healthcare. And so we became the first anchor employer in the healthcare pathway for the city. We adopted 4 schools. We had a great first year. We're actually in the second year now, and I had the pleasure of kind of leading that initiative. And that was something that, we work with plenty of schools, and we do a lot of different things, but this was a little different, right? And he was all for it. Why? Because when we think about health, education is health. Education is important. Education has the ability to lift up somebody from whatever their circumstances may be. And he is a walking testament of that. And so it's not just him talking the talk, like he walks the walk. And so we have this thing go on, it goes off very well. And then it leads into an opportunity for us to then establish a further, deeper relationship with the city and partner with them on responding to this RFP, this request for proposal from Bloomberg Philanthropies to start this healthcare high school. We talk about mission driven. This is what we're talking about, right? He had mentioned, we talked about education. He talks about why it's so important, And then between him and then the vision of actually the gentleman who I report to is our Chief Learning and Innovation Officer, Jason Nadich, the vision for our Center for Learning and Innovation is that, we want to ensure and change the view on healthcare education and innovation throughout. We want to be a leader in that space. And this is one of the many ways we're doing it. And so we talk about why that's important, how leaders are taking that edict, if you will, and leading in their respective spaces. This is just one example of how we're doing that.
It seems so obvious now to say it, doesn't it? But that connection between education and healthcare it is so close. But why do you think, Brian, that it's only really in the last few years that that the healthcare system and the education system are really starting to knit together? Because it's happening also here in Europe. It's happening a lot, obviously, in the US. But why has it taken so long? Why do you think it? Because as you said, your education is your health. So why is that, do you think?
I think that, and this is happening, I think, across industries as well. I think that what you're seeing often, especially in healthcare, is that when folks are going to college or whatever university they may do 2 or 4 year degree, sometimes they're not coming out with the direct skills that they need for this certain organization. And you see that in healthcare, you may see that in banking and finance and things like that. And so what you see a lot of are organizations going further, what we like to call upstream, if you will, to start tapping into future potential employees and really start putting their stamp on, well, what are they learning? How are they learning it? Are they learning it up to our standards? Because you know what? When you come out, you can there's a bunch of different pathways that you can take, right? And on that roadmap, if you will, if you come to the end of high school and college may not be for you, that's okay. Here are opportunities that you could come into healthcare. And you know what? You know how we practice, the things that we do. And, obviously this is something we're hoping to build with the school, but you know what's going on. Here are some opportunities that don't require a 4 year degree. They may require a certificate, but here we can funnel you into that. And one of my kind of guiding lights, if you will, is that very piece, is that I want these high school students to know, I want students to know, and people to know that if you're not going to go to college, that's okay. If you are going to go to college, that's okay too. There is a place for you in healthcare. And specifically, there's a place for you at Northwell Health. Here are opportunities that exist for that. And we want to help you. And so I think people need to know that. And one of the greatest joys, I would say, of the work that I'm doing now is I get a chance to see learning happening, right? And some of the internship programs that I'm leading, we take them through a few different pathways, but we expose them to other opportunities in the health system. And I often hear, wow, I didn't know I could do that. Because, you think healthcare, doctors and nurses, right? And granted, yes, we need those too, right? We need those. But there's a whole host of other types of jobs and positions that make this machine run that they just had no clue about. And so I'm one of the many people kind of, beating the drum on, well, here's what you can do. Here's what you should do, especially if you're into healthcare.
There's obviously a commercial driver to ensuring you have a talent pipeline that performs and services what you need as an organization. How do you think that's going to change over the next 5 years, maybe, as we see the technology landscape changing so rapidly at the moment? If I think about my children in school at the moment, the things that they're learning, and I sit there and I'm learning with them sometimes, quite often, and I think to myself, how much of this is going to be relevant to you when you leave and you're in a role, in a job? And I think it's interesting that you're taking this approach of saying, well, actually, let's hold the hands of the students and pull them into roles and pull them into areas, guide them with those pathways. How do you think that's going to change over the next 5 years? Because I think that must be a really challenging part of the program that you're building, is future proofing it for yourselves as employers, but also for them as students.
Yeah. Well, I will say this, and I'll give you a couple quick stats. One is that over the course of the next 10 years in the nation, healthcare jobs are expected to rise roughly 19%, right? We have about roughly 2 million open jobs now nationwide, and I think they expect another 2 million over the next 10 years. In New York specifically, the need for healthcare workers is going to be rising around 26%. And so when we talk about future proofing opportunities and future proofing, positions, I think we stand in a good position to say that the positions of the future are the roles that we're looking for now, right? And so opportunities in nursing, that is not going to change, right? The population here, as I'm sure in the UK as well, is getting older and living longer, right? And now a lot of the care that happens in the hospital is kind of moving out of the hospital, right? There's so many, like let's take us for example. We have 21 hospitals, over 900 outpatient facilities. That kind of shows you where a lot of this care is happening. Hospitals are definitely important, but there's a lot of ambulatory space or outpatient facilities that are really popping up to make sure we're serving the communities appropriately. And so when I think of how we're future proofing, we're ensuring that we're deeply embedded in the communities that we serve. So things like nursing, things like radiology, right? We need rad techs to look at scans among other things, right? Because again, you think about if the population's getting older and we're living longer, the opportunity, especially as you get in kind of that maybe latter third of life, healthcare becomes a bit more prevalent, right? The need for it becomes a bit more prevalent. And so I think the roles that we're looking for now and the how we're able to kind of share with students, here's the opportunities that exist, is our way of really showing them that look, we are future proof because this is what we expect the need to be. Michael has a good quote that's out there right now where, because there's often talk around, future health worker shortages and things like that. And he says, there's not going to be a future health shortage if you take care of the learning today. Right. And that's what we're trying to do. We're sharing with folks, here's what the need is, here are the skills that you need, and let's move it forward because here's what we can expect in 5-10 years or so.
Yeah, and in the initiative that we're talking a lot about the kind of the schooling initiative. A lot about is about building skills and building
Yep.
pathways into industry. How much
Yep.
of that also is about their own healthcare and teaching them to look after themselves and to? Uh, I know here in the UK, it's becoming a bigger part of the curriculum, but it still feels like it should be a bigger part of the curriculum. If you think about this instrument that we live in, our bodies, it
Yeah.
still feels like it's deprioritized in our learning. Is that a part of the program? Is that a big focus for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. To get a little more granular into the pathways that will be offered specifically for the school, and the school, we're calling it the Northwell School of Health Sciences, is we have pathways that will be focused on nursing, there'll be diagnostic medicine, physical therapy, and behavioral health. And when you think about the things that are attached to, let's just talk behavioral health specifically, there's a wellness component that the team I work closely with in our community and population health, they really focus heavily on that wellness piece, right? Yes, it's going to be focused on, like, at the end, you hopefully are you find opportunities as a case manager or things like that, but there is a wellness component to learning that needs to happen that they're very, very keen on, right? And so I work very closely with women named Michelle as well as Stacy, who are really really active in ensuring that that component, that social emotional component, is something that we follow very closely. And I'll be honest with you, this generation of students, of kids, I should say, are very open about, and you tell, I'm curious how it is over there as well, but very open about some of the mental health struggles they may face, their friends may face, and open about how can we handle these types of feelings that we may be experiencing because of fill in the blank, right? A lot of the kids that I happen to interface with are either uh, juniors or seniors. So that's 11th or 12th grade here. And after 12th grade, they go to college. And so you think about, especially a 12th grader, you know how stressful it is now to apply to colleges and universities. I mean, they're going through it. And we've had a couple of sessions where I've heard it come out. And I just really appreciate them, one, for being vulnerable enough to share openly, uh, but two, to they're actually recognizing, well, these are the folks that could help give you some of those skills or some of those tools that you can implement to help decompress or whatever, right? And so I think it's a great component, and it's something that we definitely keep top of mind, not only for this program, but true for the system as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. I think you make a really interesting point there around the, kind of the younger generation. Definitely feels like they are. I mean, it's wonderful that they're so much more comfortable talking about the mental health side of whether that's education, whether that's entering into work. I know when I started back, and I'm sure it's the same for you, Brian. It was almost frowned upon to be seen to be talking about your feelings, whatever that might be. And I think that's an important shift that we've seen. But I think thinking about our mission, our talking about failure. Do you think that younger people are still as risk averse as we were 20 years ago, or do you feel like they are more open to risk or the opportunity of learning from failure? Um, I'd love to get your view on that.
It's a great question. I don't know if there is much. I don't know if they're as risk averse. I don't think they're as risk averse as we were. I think they're open to failure, but I also think they're open and a bit more clear on what it is they could be doing instead of another thing. And what I mean by that is there are often times where, and I look online and all of that, and you can go and get a Google Cloud certificate by going to Google and doing that. You could, and I'm not saying you should do this, but you could become a creator on TikTok and do all these other things and make a livable wage. And so it's almost like they need to be shown, why am I doing what I'm doing now? What is it that you company have for me that I can be doing that I can't do anywhere else or can't potentially build somewhere else on a variety of these different platforms? So I don't think they are. I think they're open to failure in that they're willing to test out new things, and they because they can get so much instant feedback on whether it's working or whether it's not. And if it fails, they could just quickly pivot. And they haven't wasted time, or, well, sorry, they probably made it wasted time, but not money or all these other things. And so I think they're a bit more open and a bit more honest about what they're looking for. And they want companies to, like, you read the things around, they're looking for purpose, and they're looking for companies that are living their vision, and hopefully it aligns with their own personal vision. And if it doesn't, they're out. And I kind of respect them for that. You know, I see a lot of that, and I'm like, that's pretty bold, right? And kudos to them. But I think they are going to change the way uh, companies respond and react to certain things. And I think they're also going to change, the benefit landscape too, because some of them are like, I don't necessarily need this. I could be doing X other thing. Um, and I think it's beautiful to watch,
Yeah,
especially when it's done the right way.
for sure. In fact, it leads us on nicely. We have a section in our podcast which is all about taking a question from our membership, and the question that they posed for us to ask you, Brian, is if you could speak to your 20-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, ooh, 20 years old. What was I doing when I was 20? I was actually living in Italy at the time. I was doing a study abroad program. Um, what would I say to my 20-year-old self? I would tell him, I would say, look, no matter what, don't give up. And I don't get me wrong, I've kind of lived that, but I would want to reassure him to say, you know what, it's things may get a little bumpy, but no matter what, don't give up because you got it. Like you got it. That's what I would tell him.
I think that sounds like a really nice piece of advice to give yourself. And I think you'd probably look back and say that a lot of those bumps were the most enjoyable bits, Brian. No, where you kind of experience the things that shock you or scare you, and then you're realizing that actually the fun was going over those bumps, not necessarily the destination the other side.
Yeah, yeah. I see a lot of quotes on this, seen a lot of videos on this, and yes, you are absolutely right. I don't think I know I didn't appreciate the process as much when I was in it and just grinding and trying to figure out something. You couldn't have said, "Oh, is this fun?" Like I wouldn't have said it was fun. It was stressful. But I do look back on it and was like, wow, yes, that's when the learning was happening. That's who made you. Like you figured it out. And don't get me wrong, huge support system, people along the way who have kind of helped guide this my journey. But my dad always jokes that people can only do so much, right? They can kind of the whole phrase, you lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? People can walk you through or take you to the door, but you got to walk through it. They can take you to this place, but you have to show and prove. And what I learned, and I think I always knew this, I just needed a chance, was that I I am I am going to be okay. There's a certain level of drive in me that I've always had. That granted, things may get tough and it may, be frustrating, but I don't stop. I don't stop, and I will figure it out, and I have figured it out. And I'm also to the piece around taking risks, right? Which, and I can go into this if you like, but I've taken some risks in my career that are currently panning out, and I'm glad that I was comfortable enough to do that for sure.
I am going to ask you that actually, because I think being able to take the risk comes from a space where you are, as you mentioned, comfortable enough or open to the up or the down of what that risk could entail. And I think,
Okay.
so tell us about that risk. What was it that you've taken and how has it panned out?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll kind of start a little bit back in that going. So I was on a very nice kind of linear path in the HR space and had an opportunity to to get from a director role go into what was essentially like a VP role in the HR space, and had this opportunity to become, earlier I was talking about Michael, but opportunity to become his chief of staff, and that was like a fork in the road moment for me because typically those roles are folks who are in it typically much younger, earlier in career. This was my second career kind of coming into Northwell in the beginning, but especially at that stage, it was like, is this something that I want to do or should I be doing? Right? Because I didn't know what all it entailed. I didn't want to be blinded by celebrity just to say, hey, I work for him, and I wanted to know what it meant. And I had a great conversation with him, and I really sat down and I thought about it. I was like, you know what? Why not? Right? Let's take a chance, right? And so I went and did this chief of staff role, and it exposed me to so much, right? I got the chance to see the organization at a level that I truthfully didn't think I would see for quite some time. And then while in the role, what I started to notice was that, because those types of roles, you don't do them forever. You do 2, 3 years and then you're done. But what I noticed was there's some movement that's happening in the education space that I wanted to try and be a part of. And I happened to see it early on and was like, hey, I think I'm going to go for this new role. I'm going to pitch this new role. And I did that, right? In the Center for Learning Innovation, a former chief learning innovation officer. I had a great conversation with her about, here's what I'm thinking about. I'd love to come kind of work in your space. I know you all are kind of going through this shift, but here's what I'm thinking. And I pitched the idea, right? And then with my new boss, right? I was like, here's what I'm thinking. This was early on. I was probably like a year and a half in, but I'd started setting this up probably a year before I left because I saw what was happening in the landscape, and I think the vantage point gave me that choice. And so, while in the role, yes, I had another opportunity potentially to go back to the HR space, but I had to ask myself, at this stage, are you should is that what you should be doing, right? And I answered myself, I was like, you know what? Why don't I give this a shot? Right? Why don't I try this new thing? It's true. I had no precedent or anything like that. Some may argue it was kind of a dumb decision, right? But who knows? But I took a chance on this role, newly created. I had a vision for it. I had a couple projects this project that I could bring with me to really solidify it. And, pitched my current boss. I was like, here's what I'm thinking. And they were like, yeah, right? Like, okay. It was a bit of a risk. It is a bit of a risk, but it's panning out well. Now, sometimes things, and I'm no, look, I've kind of been in the game for a while. Things could be, hit or miss, right? It could be great one day and then not so great another. But as of right now, the time we're speaking, I'm glad they gave me that chance to say, hey, here's an idea. I'd love to run with it. I need your support. Um, Here's what I'd like to do. And I laid it all out. I put my cards out there. I always say, closed mouths don't get fed, right? So um, let's go for it. And now I feel like I'm kind of, I put my money where my mouth is, and we're doing some great things.
I think that's so exciting to hear, Brian, because we talked a little bit earlier about creating a culture that embraces failure or takes risks, and you're a product of an environment
Absolutely.
that you advocate for, but you're also living that, and I think that that's so exciting to hear. Um, in our last couple of minutes, I'd love to perhaps ask you then what habits or principles do you then live by that you can attribute that success to? What is it that you kind of keep core to yourself that you would say, look, other members, other people watching this, that they'd say these are the things that Brian sticks to or adheres to ensure you're true to yourself, but you're successful in that way as well? Because you're clearly, it's exciting times.
Yeah, no, very much. I think so. For me, I one of the reasons why I've been able to navigate this space in the way that I have is because, whether you've been a client of mine or not, that I may not tell you what you want to hear, but I will tell you what I think you need to hear. And so there is a certain level of authenticity and um, respectful yet direct conversation that I've had with people at varying levels that people appreciate. And I'm no stranger to that, right? And so, if you know me and, we've worked together, I'm all about making sure that we're doing the right things for the right reasons. Folks know that my heart's in the right place, right? And there may be certain initiatives or like in my past life, right? Certain things that folks may wanted to do. Like, hey, if you want to get there, okay, but we need to go about it a different way. And here's why, right? Um, and I think people appreciate that. The other thing too is that I'm very collaborative. So it's important that, none of this work that I've done, that I do, happens in a vacuum. There are hosts of great teams internally and externally that allow this work to move forward. Yes, I may think of some of these ideas and try to execute to the best of my ability, but you can never do these types of things alone, right? There's other initiatives that I'm running where I partner with folks at different sites. I need leaders who are on board. I mean, there's so many things that happen in in my world where I need the collaboration of other people. And when I'm able to kind of communicate that mission to them, and here's the why, people are on it. And I appreciate that so much. So you should know about me that I'll keep it real with you, right? I'm very authentic, right? And when it comes to those types of conversations, and that working to get like I know it sounds kind of cliche to say, oh, I'm a collaborative person, but nothing gets accomplished without the help and support of a strong team, whether that's your direct team or other teams that you work with. And so I'm just very appreciative of that.
Let me ask you a follow-up question to that then, because
Yeah.
successful teams, I'd love to get your take on what
Yeah.
makes a successful team, because at Blend, our mission is about building and promoting this idea of cognitive diversity, that your team should be diverse in how it thinks about the problems and challenges and issues that you're there to solve as whatever department or whatever part of an organization that you are. What makes a good team for you, Brian, and how do you foster that from a leadership perspective, but then how do you bring that to life in a practical sense?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that makes a great team is that whatever the team is working on, right? Um, there has to be a mission that a vision that everyone has bought into, right? So in my case, right, I will say, we want to, I want to show people, I want to show students and others the vast opportunities that exist within healthcare, right? Because I understand that college may not be for everyone, and that's okay. And if it is, that's great too. But I want to show them the opportunities that exist in healthcare and specifically at Northwell. Are you with that mission, right? Or are you with that vision? And people either are or they aren't. More often than not, they are, right? And so now that we're clear there, and there's kind of levels to all of this, but we're clear on that vision. All right, so what are we going to do about it? And then kind of plug in the variety of initiatives that fit into that vision. Okay. Overall, the system vision is around, supporting the communities that we serve, right? It's about health, all of that. Great. We're one aspect of that. So we have the vision. How are we going to do it? You need everyone's buy-in to say, hey, here's the thing you're going to do. Here's the thing I'm going to do. Here's what we're doing together. How does it all come together? And what makes a good team is folks who believe in that vision, who are comfortable with kind of understanding, you know, the different roles that people play on that team, but knowing that we're all moving in lockstep for the same goal, right? It's not infighting on, whatever, someone's trying to do this or that. No, we're moving in the same direction, right? So that's what makes a good team. Now, the piece around cognitive diversity, I think it's important. Yeah, people may have different thoughts on how we do things. And I think those things need to be, put out there and discussed and appreciated and all of that. Because what's great is that, yes, I want us moving in the same direction, but we don't all necessarily need to think the same. Like I work with some brilliant young ladies who have ideas about certain things that I'm like, oh, you know what? I love that. Let's go with that. Go. Like let's just do, right? Because in some of my work, I don't like it's okay. I don't need to, all the ideas don't need to be mine, right? The mission and the vision is the same. You said something that let's try it, right? Back to risks or failures. Let's try it. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't, all right, cool. At least it was a great idea. We tried it. Let's try to pivot. But that's what's important, I think, in making great teams. And hopefully, I guess the teams I'm a part of, kind of leading in this regard. Hopefully, they feel that way, right? Because I try to live by that every day.
Well, what comes through so clearly, Brian, is that empathetic leadership, that leadership with passion and with kindness that you exude in all the conversations we've ever had together. And I think that um, that clearly comes. You mentioned a couple of times your dad on the call, and must come from your childhood. How much of that um, is from your upbringing, and how much of that have you learned through your career?
Oh yeah, look, people, there's a phrase people often say, like, oh, like your day ones, if you will, right? My literal day ones, like my mom and my dad, have been there for me every step of the way, and they've supported me and provided me with guidance that, truthfully, like, even like lessons now that I'm just now getting, which my dad would say, oh yeah, I wish you got that a little earlier, right? But hey, it's okay, it's okay, pops. But I'm getting it now, right? But they have been so supportive in everything that I've done. And so when you think about, like, my dad actually used to be in HR, and my mom was actually in healthcare. And so hearing about how they've led, hearing things that have happened to them, I've learned from, right? Certain experiences that they've gone through, how I've been able to relate it to my own. And now, granted, I'm at a stage now where, sometimes my dad's like, "Oh, there's nothing else I can teach you, son," but I think I learned from them the importance of, you know, obviously being true to yourself, understanding your why you're doing these things, but also being just, you know, being open to the possibilities. That's a phrase that I probably heard ad nauseum, right? Just being open to the possibilities. And that has been very helpful for me because, granted, yes, there were times where I, was bouncing around and all of that, but I always remained open to the possibilities. First job I had was actually an of counsel role in Jersey, right? And did I think I was going to do that? No, but I got a chance and I took it. I was open to that possibility. Same thing going into government. Did I want to go into city government? No, but it was something that worked out. Again, open to that possibility. Um, and then when I pivoted from government to actual healthcare, what was interesting, that was a very interesting time in my life because it was a signal that I was now, quote unquote, in my mind, I thought I had failed, and that I was giving up going down the law firm route, because I was trying to get back into firms and all that. And I had an interview that really kind of solidified it for me that maybe this isn't the route you need to be going, Brian. And so that was a pivotal time for me. I did coaching, did all that stuff, and figured out that, you know what, here's the bridge for me. And it is okay to leave what I thought I was going to be doing because it doesn't signal the end. Again, open to the possibility of what's out there. And throughout my career, I've just been open to that, and it's working out. I just gave you a couple examples, as we navigated this, not only that question but the one prior, but always just open. And I think that's what I hope to pass down to my kids as well, because you're right. You started off earlier saying that um, it's very rare to have these kind of linear types of careers, and I'm kind of a walking testament with that.
I love that bit where you just said about where you mentioned that moment where you decided not to or didn't pursue that legal career. It felt like failure, but in
Yeah.
truth, it's the start of your career to date to where you are now. And I think so often it's, when do you take that snapshot in time that you might have viewed something as a failure that actually is now such a formative part of your career. And I love how you've positioned that. I think that's really, really lovely. Brian, let me ask you like one final question. We always ask our
Sure.
podcast guests to leave us with a recommendation. It could be anything. And of course, we have to firstly recommend your own podcast to listen to that. That's something that we do have to
Yes.
recommend our listeners do.
Yes.
But it could, but other than that, of course, what would you recommend? It could be a book, it could be a product, it could be anything that you recommend that you think the members of Blend would find useful in their lives.
There's this NPR book called, basically, like, how to begin your podcast on a budget, if you will. And it's a great book for those who are just getting started in this space. And yes, it's focused on podcasting, but I think some of the lessons that they share in that book are applicable to even if you wanted to start your YouTube journey or whatever, right? Because it goes through. What's funny, I have the book here that I went through, like that I wrote all my stuff in there, and I actually wrote the kind of the intro to my show in that after finishing the book. But it kind of walks you through, well, why do you want to do this? You say you want to do this thing, but why do you want to do it? Who are you trying to reach? What are you trying to accomplish? And I think that level of intentionality and approach is important for those people who are looking to get into podcasting or get into video content creation or do whatever. There are nuggets in there that have been very helpful for me that I, you talk about a good share. I think it's a great share. I think, and I'll give you the link if you need the link, but it's this NPR book on basically how to start your podcast on a budget.
Brian, thank you. We will link both your podcast, because I'm sure people are interested to hear why people have left. I have started listening, and I think you're on series 3 now, and I'm a big fan. So keep up the good work on that. Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today. I think we're here talking about failure and embracing the opportunities that come from failure, and I think you've clearly embody all of those things. So thank you for being open with us and sharing with us all your learnings today. We're excited to hear what you're going to be doing with your new educational institution and forming lives of young people in New York. I think it's incredibly exciting. So we will continue the conversation with you. I know we will. And thank you so much for joining us. And we'll speak to you soon, I'm sure.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate you all taking the time, and always a great conversation.
Speak to you soon, Brian. Make sure you subscribe to the 4 Forward channel so you don't miss any new episodes. I'll see you soon.